So we're kicking off this Sunday together with Leonard a relationship series. We're going to be looking at different aspects of relationships. This Sunday is the first one, and he will be carrying on with that, Lord willing, next week. So we're going to be looking at a strange aspect of relationships. And to do that, I want to look at three incidences that happened, three stories, three situations. They play out over thousands of years, or they're separated by thousands of years, but they obviously share something in common with one another, but they share something in common with you as well. So let's take a look at the first one, which just happened a couple of months ago. I think you'll remember this. Let's have a look.
Oh, Richard! Oh, wow! Wow!
Wow, says Chris Rock. Okay, let's rewind the clock now, 2,300 years ago, because maybe you won't remember that. There was a man by the name of Alexander the Great. That's the name you've heard before. He had a very good friend. His name was Clytus. His full name, in fact, was Clytus the Black. I'm assuming he was slightly more tan than me. But the reason these two guys became such good friends is Clytus, in fact, saved Alexander's life in the final battle against the Persians in the year 334 BC. A Persian soldier was about to kill Alexander with a battle hammer, and Clytus severed his arm off. And from that day on, they became good friends. But some 5-6 years later, these two friends were at a banquet, and they got into an argument with one another. Historians are not sure what it was about. Maybe some stupid Facebook entry, who knows? But anyway, Alexander the Great throws a javelin in anger and pins Clytus straight through the heart. 4 historical accounts tell us that Alexander the Great was distraught at the death of his friend Clytus the Black, who now obviously saw black. So now, let's rewind the clock another 1,000 years. You can read this story in Numbers 20. We've got the Israelites in the desert being led by Moses, and they're complaining again. Professional complainers. Maybe you know people like that. And they're complaining that they're sick and tired of the camping, and there's not enough food, and there's not enough water. That was the big complaint. What have you? And then they're saying things like it was much better for us being slaves back in Egypt. Very unusual for complainers to exaggerate. So then God says to Moses, God is many things, but he's not boring. He says to Moses, Moses, go and speak to a particular rock. Instead of speaking to that rock, Moses speaks to the people. In fact, he insults the people, and then out of rage and fury, he whacks that poor rock that's been lying there for thousands of years, minding its own business. The rock starts crying. Bad joke, I know, but anyway, the rock starts crying. Water starts coming out of the rock. People are happy, they got water, but of course, Moses is furious. I think you see what they share in common. Someone got angry, really angry. And that's why I say these guys share something in common with you, because I think it's fair to say somewhere along the line, you've been angry. You got really angry. Just some time ago, I was trying to make an online payment, something that was really important, and it had a deadline to it. And the funds were in the account, but the bank kept declining the payment. So I'm on the phone to the retailers, and I'm apologizing, back on the phone with the bank again, and I'm flicking back and forth, and we're trying it again and again, and every time, even though the bank says it's fine, it gets declined. Needless to say, I lived up to my name, Mark, which in Latin means warlike. That's what happened that day. We're going to get angry, or perhaps maybe you're angry right now. Maybe you and your husband had an argument in the car to church, or maybe someone treated you with disrespect in the parking lot, or maybe some clown is sitting in your seat that you always sit in on. Somewhere along the line, we get angry. And of course, it's a huge part of life, but it's a huge part of relationships, because this is no news to us. Most of our anger is directed towards people, our spouses, children, politicians, Springbok teams. Okay, this kind of thing. But maybe you say, well, not always. Sometimes we get angry with objects. Yes, sometimes we're angry at objects, but it's a lesser degree. Maybe we get angry with that cell phone that's not connecting to the Wi-Fi, or you get super angry with that computer that's just gone and lost all your work that you've been working on for 6 months, or you get super angry with a car that won't start. But if you think about that, even that affects our relationships, because it's your kids that are around you when that cell phone's not connecting. And it's your work colleagues that are listening to you engage with that computer in a colorful way. Or it's your poor husband or wife that's sitting in the car with you when that car won't start. Anger is a huge part of life, huge part of relationships. But I don't know about you. I've got some questions when it comes to anger. Is it good or bad? Some people say it's good, but can go bad, and that's not good. And then you've got this thing of, if it's okay to be angry, how long can I be angry for? And can I throw things? Jesus threw things. And then there's this line that whether you're a Christian or non-Christian, you've probably heard this before: in your anger, do not sin. What on earth does that actually mean? So let's get started. Let's have a look at anger before I run over time and you get angry. I want to show you, apparently there are 6 basic, huge emotions that we all experience. Now, fair enough, there's many others. A lot of them overlap, but the experts tell us these are the 6 big ones. I'll put them on the screen for you in no particular order, by the way. So we've got anger, disgust, fear, happiness, sadness. Now, the 6th one is quite a surprise. You ready? Surprise. Okay. Told you it was a surprise. Now, there's something so important about these emotions. None of them are bad. They can go bad, but emotions in themselves, these 6 emotions, they're not bad. They can go bad. Now, maybe you're looking at them and you say, are you sure? I mean, anger aside, you've got fear up there. Isn't fear bad? Well, it depends. It's an emotion that God has put in you and me that used in the right way, the right time, right situation, the right level. It's for your protection. It's for your self-defense. This is why most of you will not kiss and hug snakes and spiders. All right, Cappy does, but he's mentally unstable. It doesn't count. And then most of you are not going to walk on scaffolding that's 30 meters high without a harness or blindfolding. You're not going to do that kind of thing. You'll say to me, because I have what? A healthy fear. And see, anger is the same thing. Anger in itself is not bad, but oh yes, it can go bad. And to prove my point, you know which individual in the Bible gets referred to the most or most frequently as getting angry? God. And we know God is pure and holy and perfect. So surely that points to us that anger in itself cannot be bad. But when it comes to you and me, well, that's a different story. You and me, we're tainted with sin. We're fallen creatures. So everything associated with me, everything I touch, everything that is me has fallen. This planet has fallen. My emotions are fallen. So you bet anger with me can go bad. So I think that's a question we need to look at together. How do I know when anger has gone bad? How do I know when my anger has gone bad? Now, if you look in the Bible, such a practical book, such a great book, and you will find anger all over the place. You jump into the Old Testament, you've got a whole lot of characters that get angry. You've got Cain, Balaam. In fact, most of the prophets get angry. You jump to the self-help book of Proverbs. There's a whole lot of handles and suggestions on anger. You've got this emotional book of Psalms, and some of those Psalms are written in anger. You jump to the New Testament. You've got the epistles. They refer to anger. You've got the life of Jesus. You see anger. You see Paul getting angry. So there is enough resources, so much to look at. And we've taken all of that and we've come up with a line, a kind of easy line to remember, but I just want to give you a heads up. It's a cheesy line, so you can't get angry with me. It's cheesy to help you remember, but the point of the line is to make sure your anger, my anger, doesn't go to bad. So you ready for the line? Here's your take home for today. Let's put it on the screen. Anger should come slowly, stay briefly, and require no apology chiefly. I warned you it was cheesy, but it'll help us. Anger should come slowly, stay briefly, require no apology chiefly. We're going to unpack that for the next couple of minutes together, but this is just briefly a summary of what we're trying to say with that line. Let's have a look. When I say anger should come slowly, this is what I'm saying. Let's put it on the screen. Act at the appropriate time. And when I say stay briefly, we're saying feel for an appropriate time. And when they're saying require no apology chiefly, this is what we're saying, act in an appropriate way. Now I asked them to underline two rather important words there, act and feel. You see, when it comes to anger, it has those two components. There's no getting away from that. There's, of course, a feeling side, but there is always a doing side, an action side. You've heard Leonard from this pulpit and platform many times say, hey, love is not just a feeling, it's an act of your will. Guys, this is why you should buy flowers on the odd occasion. You don't just feel love, you do something with it. Anger is in the same bracket. It's got a feeling side, but it definitely always has an action, a doing side. Now, this is one of the definitions, descriptions that I came across when it speaks about good anger, godly anger. There's something we need to look at here. So let's put that definition on. It says godly anger is energy aroused, there's the feelings, and released into action, there's your doing. Now, this is so important. In the defense of something good and against something evil. There's some bad news for you and bad news for me in that description. Let's go back to your computer that lost all that work and you throw the keyboard on the floor. Is that computer evil? I know you're sitting there thinking, yeah, I bet it's evil. It's a stupid machine. When you're stuck in traffic because there's bad weather or an accident up front, or your wife is late for an appointment because she's stuck in traffic, is that situation evil? I could give you inconvenient and frustrating, but it's not evil. Are the All Blacks evil? So you bet they are. So this is what I'm saying. If you and I are getting angry at objects that are neutral or situations that are neutral, it is wrong. It's bad. But let's say you are angry in the defense of something good or against something evil. Here's our line. It should come slowly, stay briefly, and require no apology chiefly. So let's unpack that first one, which is act at the appropriate time. Now, one of the reasons we read the Bible, there's just so many reasons, but some of you did Reading God's Word with us the other weekend. The number one reason which we highlighted why you have to read this amazing book is to get to know the author, to get to know God. God describes himself in so many ways, so many situations to get to know God. But there's a particular line that he uses quite frequently to describe himself. And when I say quite frequently, it is all over the place. We're about to put it on the screen in a minute. We're going to look at it from Psalm 145, but I could have used Psalm 103, or we could have used Nehemiah chapter 9, or we could have used Nahum chapter 1, or Joel chapter 2, or Jonah chapter 4. That's how many times it comes up. You can probably quote it. Maybe you don't know where it is, but here we go. Let's take a look. Psalm 145. The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, rich, or some translations say abounding in love. What a verse. Because God is saying, hey, you want to know me? I'm gracious. Maybe you need to hear this. Maybe you're going through a tough time. God is gracious, compassionate. He loves you. But I want to zoom in on this line where he says slow to anger. And that's why we had to unpack what is anger very carefully, because anger's got a feeling side which is instant. But then it has an action side, which with self-control and discipline should happen after some time. You see, when we read that verse, slow to anger, I think we misunderstand that. We think God says, I'm slow to anger. It's like people do something wrong, and he's okay. Then they do it again, and They're still, God is still okay. And they do it for a third time, and he's still fine. Now they do it for a fourth time. Now he's really ticked. That's not what that verse is saying. That verse is saying God will take action at the right time. Let me give you an example. He waits 400 years before destroying the Canaanites. You say, well, that's one of those stories in the Bible that's really difficult for us to understand. And atheists love to throw that in our faces, like, see, your God is involved with genocide. And I know that's a very sticky topic. That's a preach for another day. I'll leave that for Leonard. All right, but now, just a thought on that. He's God. He knows better. But there's another aspect to that. Have you got any idea what the Canaanites were like? They made the Nazi Germans look cute. They would throw, I'll just give you one example. They would throw brand new little babies. I was at a wedding this week. There was a 3-month-old baby. She was gorgeous, bright eyes, watching everything. They would take that kind of baby, throw it into fire pits alive to worship their idols. You better believe God was going to take action. And he took action, and he decided the right time 400 years later. Let me give you a human example. Young man finds himself in New Orleans, and he ends up at a slave market, and we're talking some 200 odd years ago. And he sees 2 slave girls being auctioned off at this slave market. And he describes in his book, in his memoirs, righteous indignation overcoming him. That feeling is instant. But then he says, I turned to my friend and I said, this is wrong. And if I get the chance to put a stop to this, I will stop this. And that's exactly what he did 20 years later. His name, Abraham Lincoln. You see, your wife or your husband treats you with disrespect in a social gathering or what have you. Do you wait for when you're alone? Do you wait for when they're in the right space to listen, act at the right time? When my kids were a lot younger and they misbehaved once or twice a week, I would send them first to their room. Just think this through. Like, am I seeing this right before I took action? That colleague or that work employee or that individual lies to you, steals from the company, whatever you say, I'll see you first thing Monday morning. You see, slow to anger is not trying to pretend not to be angry. It's taking action at the right time. But this is what you and I generally do. Oh, this cannot wait a minute. Where's my cell phone? Where are my keys? He is going to see me right now. I'm walking down to the office right this second. I cannot wait any longer. How has that generally worked for you? You see, the experts, the psychologists tell us, when you're feeling these intense emotions of anger and you try and take action, it's very difficult to take wise action. The fancy term for that is called cognitive incapacitation. I'll put that in simple terms for me to understand. The more angry you are, the dumber you are. The more angry you become, the dumber you become. And sometimes just a little bit of time and wise action go hand in hand. Anger should come slowly. In other words, act at the right time. But then our next one, stay briefly. What is that? Feel for an appropriate time. The best way for me to describe this is that anger, your anger, is not a blankie. Do you remember your blankie? You would sleep with your blankie. That blankie would never leave your side. You would drag it around with you wherever you went. It would go to the shops with you, Sunday school, work. Do you remember that? And you take comfort in the blankie. Anger is not a blankie. And when you hold on to those feelings of anger, trying to get comfort, or I'm justified, here's the problem. It will consume you. It will destroy you. So you say, well, Mark, how long am I supposed to feel angry for then? Pretty much less than 12 hours. So where do you get that from? From a verse that you know so well. Listen to what Paul says in Ephesians 4, verse 26. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. So this is basic geography and maths. The sun rises and sets in 12 hours, or it sets and rises. You've basically got 12 hours. And it kind of dawned on me the other day, we've even got less time in winter to be angry. God is saying, you are not designed to permanently hold on to those feelings. They will destroy you. Now, there is something so interesting about this verse. Let's have a look at the second part, or verse 27. And do not give the devil a foothold. Do not give the enemy or Satan a foothold. In the Second World War, the Germans were so concerned about the Allies landing on any of the beaches of Western Europe, especially Western France. So they fortified those beaches. They put landmines and they put barbed wire and they had cannons and machine guns facing those beaches. You see, this was their concern. They kind of knew if the Allies land on any of those beaches, there is no stopping them marching all the way to Germany. And that's exactly what happened on the 6th of June, 1944. We know it as D-Day. Some of you may be remember that opening scene of Saving Private Ryan. It's just chaos, what have you, but they got a beach. They landed on those Normandy beaches, and if you know your history, within less than a year, within let's say about 10 months, they marched all the way to Germany. You hold on to those feelings of anger. There is no stopping the march to bitterness, resentment, a destroyed marriage, destroyed relationships. Your own health declines. It will destroy you. It will destroy you. We are not designed to keep reliving it and holding on to it. You still giving your husband the cold shoulder a week or two later? Foothold. You refuse to sit with a boss a week after an incident? Foothold. You just keep replaying what that individual did to you back in university, and every time you think about it, those feelings just come? Foothold. You see, someone should actually be able to ask you the next day. They say, listen, I heard what happened to you. That wasn't great, or what have you. How are you feeling? And you should be able to say, I'm okay. I'm not letting the enemy get a foothold here. A landmine got him. You see, it's almost like having a smoke detector in a house. It's good to have that smoke detector. The fact that you and I can get angry in the defense of something good against something evil, it's right. It's living a passionate life. We aren't wired to keep holding on to that. That smoke detector, if it's blaring, it means something is wrong, something needs to be done. You don't live with a smoke detector permanently screaming in the house. Anger should come slowly, stay briefly, and require no apology chiefly. So let's look at that last part, where I say act in an appropriate way. So I remember some time ago when I started working on this message, I sat down one particular morning and opened up my laptop, and while that's booting up, I'm drinking my holy drink, tea, of course, just in case you don't know what that is. It's not coffee, all right? And I'm flicking through News 24, just checking the headlines for the day, and I read this kind of headline in these words. It says, road rage incident, someone shoots victim, takes victim to hospital, and then hands himself in. And I'm like, what? You want to tell me he got so ticked off, he shoots somebody, then becomes Mr. Ambulance, paramedic, takes them to the hospital, then becomes Mr. Cop, and takes him to... That is so funny and tragic, rolled into one. If in your anger, you're screaming, shouting, swearing, insulting, dropping comments, cold shouldering, slamming doors, shooting road users, you have sinned. It has gone bad. Bottom line, if the emotion of anger is controlling you instead of you controlling it, it has gone wrong. And what's the clue? An apology is required for your behavior. It's such an interesting verse that we've probably also heard before from Proverbs 29, verse 11. It says, "Fools vent their anger, but the wise quietly hold it back." You know, when I read that verse, I thought it's such an interesting word there, vent. I mean, in the English language, vent has got a double meaning if you think about it. Vent, of course, means to express, but it's also an object. And what does that object do? You have a vent. We have vents here. You have a vent in your home. It just allows air through. It is not designed to control. No, it just allows through. Those who are fools have got no way of controlling that emotion, no way of holding it. No, it just flows straight through. But if you're wise, you know how to hold it back. I've kind of paraphrased this verse in a line just to help myself, and I'm nowhere where I want to be, but basically, fools react, the wise respond. Fools react, but it's the wise who respond. You see, anger's coming your way. In fact, there are situations where you're supposed to get angry in the defense of good against something evil, but you and I are always faced with a decision. How do I express that anger? How do I behave? Let me act, let me do appropriately. So maybe you're sitting and thinking, but Mark, can we go back to that story of Jesus? He throws over tables and whips people. That doesn't, can I be honest, doesn't sound like self-control to me. So when I say act in an appropriate way, the word appropriate is very appropriate. Sometimes in the defense of something good or against something evil, the action, the doing, can I say, could be drastic, not necessarily just meek and mild and gentle. And Jesus decided the appropriate action was exactly that, because they had turned his father's house into the Boksburg flea market. And then there's something else that's so interesting about that story. Two little points that can so be overlooked very quickly. I don't know if you're aware of the fact it happened twice. And what's interesting, Jesus did exactly the same thing twice. Now, if something happens to you that makes you super angry, and I ask you weeks or months later, hey, God forbid, but if that had to happen to you again, would you do exactly the same thing? And you say, yes, absolutely, I would. Doesn't that hint of self-control? But there's another little fact in that story. The Bible says Jesus sat down and made a whip. Now, I'm no expert whip maker, even though I have kids. I think it takes some time to make a whip. Jesus had full self-control. But let's jump back to our story of Moses. God asks him to speak to the rock, and instead of speaking to the rock, he slams and hits that rock. And it dawned on me yesterday, if you're a desert rock or a Chris rock, this is a tough world to grow up in. But I'd rather be a rock than a stone. That's something else that also dawned on me yesterday. I'll let that one sit for a while. He can do these things when he's not here, obviously. Total loss of self-control. And then God says to Moses, after that incident, no entering into the promised land for you, pal. I've grown up with that story, and can I be honest with you, for many years, it never really sat well with me. Because I'd think, God, can I be honest? I find that a bit harsh. I find that a bit unfair. It's the Israelites, they're the morons. They're the ones that are behaving like idiots. Isn't that something what you and I very often do? We highlight the inappropriate situation that is causing my inappropriate behavior. And then it kind of dawned on me that there's many reasons I think God decided Moses wouldn't enter the promised land, but this was one of them for his own benefit. You see, no matter who you are, or no matter what the situation, if you behave or act or do something inappropriately, people lose respect. I'll say that again. No matter who you are, and sometimes we say, well, I'm the dad, or I'm the boss. No. No matter who you are, and no matter how bad the situation, you behave in an inappropriate way, people lose respect. Moses, as it were, made it impossible for the people to follow him into the new chapter of their lives, into the promised land. You hit out instead of help out. You criticize instead of correct. You slam or swear instead of speak. People lose respect. They lose respect. And if you behave inappropriately in your anger as a mom, as a dad, as a husband, as a wife, as a friend, as a leader, as a boss, you undermine yourself as a mom, as a dad. You undermine yourself as a husband, as a wife, as a friend, as a leader, as a boss. There are times we are supposed to get angry in the defense of something good against something evil. Anger should come slowly. Act at the appropriate time. It should stay briefly, feel for appropriate time, less than 12 hours. And act in an appropriate way. Require no apology chiefly. The morning that I woke up in March and checked the headline, which of course raced across the planet, where Will Smith slaps Chris Rock in front of millions of people, I lost respect for one of my favorite actors. Anger is coming your way, unless you don't have a pulse. And you and I are faced right there. Is this good or evil? And if it is in the defense of good and evil, just stop and think. I'm going to do something at the appropriate time. I'm going to feel for a little time. And the way I handle this thing, I'm going to make myself and my family and the world proud. It's not going to require an apology. Come, let's stand. I'm going to pray for all of us, but I want to just encourage certain individuals that are definitely in this auditorium this morning. Perhaps you were angry this week or somewhere down the line in the last couple of months, and you did something that requires an apology. Your wife needs that apology. Your children need that apology. Go and apologize. But I want to invite those of you who are really angry at something that's happened, that's really hurt you, something that's evil in the defense of something good, and you don't know what to do, where to turn, all of you. That's why we come as pastors to the front. We want to pray with you. We want to be with you in that situation. And some of you, if I can be straight, have got anger issues. This thing controls your life. We want to pray with you and break that thing. Come, let's pray together. Lord, we want to firstly just say thank you for the relationships in our lives. They are dear to us, and we are surrounded by beautiful, precious people. Where would we be without them? We realize we've got this emotion, though, that really can affect the people around me. Father, help me. Help me. Help me only get angry in the defense of something good against something evil, and help me to take action at the right time. Not hold on to those feelings and deal with it in a way that's appropriate. Pray this in your precious name, Jesus. Amen. Bless you.